Here is a conversation you have been avoiding. You know it needs to happen. You have known for months, maybe years, and every day you do not have it. Something in you makes a quiet calculation, the discomfort of having it versus the cost of not having it, and decides again that today is not the day. That calculation is not unique to you. It is not a personal weakness. It is one of the most common and most costly psychological patterns in human behavior. And it produced the most consequential miscarriage of justice in recorded history. The man who made that calculation had the authority to stop it. He had the evidence to stop it. He even had a direct warning from his wife to stop it. And he washed his hands instead. His name was Pontius Pilate. And his story is not primarily a story about evil. It is a story about what happens when the fear of conflict becomes stronger than the commitment to truth. Pilate was Rome's appointed governor of Judea, a pragmatic man in a difficult posting. Judea was volatile, politically, religiously, perpetually on the edge of insurrection. His job was to keep the peace, to manage competing pressures, to be Caesar's man in a province that made Caesar's men age faster than anywhere else in the empire. When the religious leaders brought Jesus to him demanding crucifixion, Pilate did what a careful administrator does. He examined the case. He interviewed the accused. And he reached a conclusion. I find no basis for a charge against this man. He said it once, then twice, then a third time. 3 separate declarations of innocence from the man who held the man's life in his hands. His wife sent him a message mid-trial. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man. I have suffered greatly in a dream because of him. The external evidence confirmed his internal assessment. He knew, and he crucified him anyway. To understand how that happens, you need to understand what Pilate was actually managing. He was not managing a legal case. He was managing a crowd that was loud, unanimous, and escalating. A crowd that had the specific political leverage to make his career, and possibly his life, very uncomfortable. Psychologists who study conflict avoidance identify a consistent pattern in people who prioritize social harmony above personal conviction. They do not make one large compromise. They make a sequence of small ones, each one a reasonable adjustment to a difficult situation, each one moving them incrementally further from the position they actually hold. Watch Pilate's sequence. First attempt, he offers to release a prisoner as was the custom. He presents Barabbas, a convicted murderer, alongside Jesus, calculating that the crowd will choose Jesus. They do not. Second attempt, he has Jesus flogged, a brutal intermediate punishment, offered as a substitute for crucifixion. It is not enough. Third attempt, he presents Jesus publicly, wearing the crown of thorns. Behold the man, an appeal to pity. The crowd shouts louder. Each concession was designed to resolve the conflict without having the conflict. Each one failed, because the crowd's demand was not for negotiation. It was for capitulation. And the peacemaker's fundamental miscalculation is always the same. They believe that one more concession will satisfy the demand. It never does, because the crowd can smell the absence of conviction, and what has no spine bends until it breaks. Then came the sentence that ended the deliberation. If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. 6 words. That was the moment. Not the trial, not the crowd, not the religious leader's persistence. That single political threat, targeting the specific thing Pilate could not afford to lose, is where his decision was actually made. His friendship with Caesar was his identity. It was his position, his power, his safety, his future. And the moment the crowd named it as the price of doing the right thing, Pilate's internal calculation resolved instantly. This is what psychologists call the integrity tipping point, the specific moment when an external pressure becomes significant enough to override an internal moral standard. Pilate had 3 convictions in sequence. The man is innocent, my wife's warning confirms it, and the crowd wants him dead. He held those three things simultaneously for as long as he could, and when he could not hold them any longer, he chose the one that protected the most. He chose Caesar. And then he washed his hands. "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." Researchers Chenbo Zhang and Katie Liljenquist documented a phenomenon they called the Macbeth effect, the tendency for people to engage in physical cleansing after moral transgression. When subjects in their studies were asked to recall an ethical failure, they consistently showed heightened desire to clean their hands. They rated cleansing products as more desirable. They chose soap over pencils as compensation for participating. The body attempts to wash away what the mind has done. Pilate's hand-washing was not theater. It was the automatic psychological response of a man who had just watched himself do something his own conscience had already convicted him for. But here is the clinical reality that makes this so significant. Washing your hands does not transfer responsibility. Pilate declared the crowd responsible. History declared Pilate responsible. The attempt to outsource a moral decision to the loudest voices in the room does not absolve the person who held the authority to decide differently. It only confirms who held it and chose not to use it. James chapter 1 verse 8 describes a specific kind of person. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Double-mindedness is not the absence of values. It is the simultaneous possession of values and the willingness to override them under sufficient pressure. Pilate had values. They were simply not strong enough to survive contact with political consequence. And the tragedy of Pilate's story is not that he was exceptional in this. It is that he was ordinary. Most people in his position, under that specific pressure, with those specific stakes, would have made the same calculation. The crowd, the career, the comfort, over the inconvenient truth. 1,000 smaller versions of that calculation happen every day, in performance reviews where the honest assessment is softened, in relationships where the necessary conversation is perpetually deferred, in organizations where everyone sees the problem and no one will be the one to name it. Character does not collapse in a single dramatic moment. It erodes through the accumulation of decisions where the discomfort of truth was traded for the temporary relief of peace. So here is what this story asks of you. 3 things, grounded in both the psychology and the text. First, name the calculation you are making. When you avoid a difficult conversation, you are not simply being kind or diplomatic. You are making a trade, your integrity for temporary comfort. Naming that trade honestly is the beginning of making it differently. Not, "I just don't want to upset anyone," but, "I am choosing my comfort over this person's right to the truth." That sentence is harder to live with, which is exactly why it helps. Second, distinguish between peacemaking and peacefaking. A peacemaker moves toward conflict for the purpose of genuine resolution. A peacefaker moves away from conflict for the purpose of personal comfort, at someone else's expense. Pilate was not keeping the peace. He was preserving his position by allowing an injustice. Ask yourself honestly, is the conflict you are avoiding genuinely harmful to address? Or is avoiding it primarily serving you? Those are different situations requiring different responses. Third, build the conflict muscle before you need it. Every act of courageous honesty, however small, strengthens the capacity for the next one. Every avoidance weakens it. The person who can have the minor difficult conversation today is building the capacity to have the major one when it counts. Pilate had never built that muscle. He had spent a career managing, negotiating, and accommodating. And when the moment came that required him to simply stand on what he knew to be true, the muscle was not there. Do not wait for a moment of high stakes to discover whether yours is. Drop a comment below and tell me, is there a conversation you have been avoiding that you know needs to happen? You do not have to name who it is with. Just acknowledge that it exists. That acknowledgement is itself a small act of courage. Subscribe for weekly videos where psychology and the Bible examine the same human experiences together